Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Al Womble, and I am the state director here at New Frontier Action. And I am really excited tonight because tonight I get to bring to you one of my friends who I think is one of the most dynamic individuals I've ever had the pleasure of meeting here in the state of Iowa. And that says a lot considering I've had a chance to meet all of the different presidential candidates that came through this last primary season. But this man stands out to me personally. So I want everybody to give a big warm welcome wherever you are. Stand, clap, jump up and down. Make sure you also check us out at newfrontieractionfund.com or check us out on Facebook. But it is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight the man who is coming to us all the way from Washington, D.C., voted most attractive elected official by Vogue magazine. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, California Congressman Ro Khanna. Ro, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, I'm so excited to be on. I'm excited for your show. I am wondering whether you give this kind of over-the-top introduction to every guest you have on, but I'll take it after a long day in Washington. So you're a real friend, and I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much. We had a chance to meet a couple years ago when you were visiting the state of Iowa, and I really appreciate the fact that every time you've come back, you let me know so I can come and see you and of course, Cooper as well, who works on your staff. That's always just such a thrill for someone like myself. But tonight, I'm going to be talking to you about a program that I know that you helped set up here in the state of Iowa, and I was wondering if you may want to give a few opening remarks on it. And that is the program that took place out in Jefferson, Iowa, that worked with I believe that is the Forge Foundation. And I'm going to get into some deeper questions about that, but I would like to see if you'd like to begin with just some opening comments on this particular program.
Sure, Al. Well, as you know, I represent Silicon Valley, and one of my passions for our country has been that the wealth generation of the digital economy can't just be concentrated in a few places like Silicon Valley or Boston, Austin. We've got to have rural America. We've got to have Black and Brown America participate in the wealth generation of the future. The reason this matters is people shouldn't have to leave their hometown to get a job in the new economy. You go to these many communities and you hear about a brain drain. People have a sense of loss that their kids are having to leave the communities they grew up in. It hurts not just the economy, it hurts the sense of community, a sense of belonging. And not every job about technology is a job on social media, or Google or Facebook. I mean, even the NFL now uses, if you watch an NFL game, they use Microsoft Teams, the commentators to do a lot of the commentary. We saw the financial markets. A lot of it is online trading. We've seen with agriculture, precision agriculture and regenerative agriculture, construction, we've seen automatic design and manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. So every traditional industry has a tech component. And what we did in Jefferson, and it was not me, it was a lot of local stakeholders. They said, Ro, we want to partner with Silicon Valley. We want to partner to create economic opportunity, digital opportunity for young people in the community so they don't have to necessarily get a four-year degree. They can get the skills, get a job, stay local. And Accenture partnered with Des Moines Community College, with Iowa Central and Community College, and has created a terrific program there. The first participants are already getting their training. They're getting paid as an apprentice. They're taking classes. There's scholarships for them to take a 9-course class, and then they are getting paid as apprenticeships. And it's going to lead to high-paying jobs. And it's not just for folks in Jefferson, but it's for a lot of the Latino community near Carroll as well. There's someone who set up scholarships for them. So we've got a lot of these tech leaders who participated in setting this up.
That is excellent. So that kind of leads into my, first question here. So in an interview with the Carroll Times-Herald, it mentions that you had proposed creating a federal institute of technology with 30 different locations, and that Iowa State University actually would be an ideal locations for one of those. What would make Iowa a preferred location for this sort of development? Because mostly people don't think Iowa and technology, they think Iowa and farming.
Well, they should think Iowa technology because people probably aren't aware of the history that the digital computer was actually invented in Iowa State. It was invented, and of course, the founder of Intel, Bob Noyce, is from Iowa. So Iowa has this rich tradition of leadership in technology, and one of the things Iowa has going for it is a very strong higher education system, community college system. A lot of good community colleges, a lot of good universities, a lot of talent. What has been ignored is that there hasn't been the same funding, the same partnerships, and so I think there's a lot of untapped talent in
Mhm.
the state and in many other states, which we need to capitalize on to create the industries of the future. And another partnership we worked on with Silicon Valley and Iowa State is a massive grant for regenerative agriculture and programs with
Mhm.
farmers to actually help with carbon sinks and dealing with climate change. So the possibilities are huge.
Yeah, no, I actually did know that about Iowa, but then again, I am a history nerd. So for somebody like me, that's, something that's like, oh, this is cool. I get to brag about my state every once in a while. The only problem is usually when I travel out of the state of Iowa, they're asking me, hey, is that the state where they grow potatoes? I'm like, no, that's Idaho. Totally different spot. But so my next question would be, is that, how specifically do you see programs like this being able to fight poverty, as opposed to simply just trying to bring back manufacturing jobs? What makes this a superior vehicle for wealth generation, as opposed to just saying, opening another tire plant or something like
Yeah.
that?
Well, we need to do both. I mean, obviously, we need advanced manufacturing and manufacturing in this country. But you look at the auto manufacturing, for example, and a lot of those auto manufacturing jobs now require a digital component. A lot of, GM just is hiring the 10,000 or 3,000 technology workers. So
Mhm.
you have a hybrid, even in traditional manufacturing, of
Mhm.
technology skills. And a lot of the unions, in fact, in their contracts say, well, we need to make sure that technology training is part of it. We need to make sure that these jobs aren't going to be automated. So I view manufacturing and technology as things that coexist, not ones that are competing. And then you look at it, there are about 12 million manufacturing jobs currently in this country. Well, in 5
Mhm.
years, there are going to be about 25 million tech jobs, twice as many. And the multiplier effect of those is even more than manufacturing. Meaning, if you have a local tech industry, they're going to be supporting the local dry cleaner, the local businesses.
Mhm.
So it is so important for any diversified economy to have a tech component, particularly for the young folks. Why the tech jobs, as an average, pay twice as much the median wage, $80,000 to $40,000. So why not have that? Now, do I think that's sufficient for poverty program? No. I mean, I think there are a lot of programs we need in terms of child allowance and an earned income tax credit and expanding SSDI and SSI and assistance to people that is necessary beyond the expansion of the tech economy. But what I do think is that we have to distribute the wealth generation in this country so we don't have a situation where most of the wealth generation is happening on the coast and excluding rural communities, excluding Black people, excluding Latino community, excluding tribal communities. That's not a way to build a nation.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. You know very well that I came from the construction industry,
I
and even
do.
in my industry, we saw things moving in a much more technical fashion. When it came to the training that I had to give to individuals for the job, that was all on computers. So even when I was there, our IT department exploded as far as the number of people that were required because of the number of online trainings that we had to do.
Exactly. Now, why should those online jobs for construction be either offshore in some other country, or why should they all be in tech centers? I mean, couldn't the construction industry have tech capacity, capability of those jobs that support that locally in these communities? So everyone understands that technology is transforming all these industries. They have this fear, or this, some people think, oh, we don't want to be Silicon Valley. No one's saying everyone in the country should be Silicon Valley. That'd be a very boring
Mhm.
world. What we're saying is, if you're going to have technology in local industries that is absolutely necessary, make sure your kids have those opportunities, that they can stay in the communities they grew up in, so families don't have to be split up, and
Hmm.
make sure that industries, the local industries that you want to thrive, are able to have local tech talent, that they don't have to go offshore for that talent, and that they can compete in a global economy.
Hmm. No, and I think that that's something, and you and I have talked about this before, a very crucial part of this plan that actually got me very excited. It's the fact that, when we have these sorts of tech industry type jobs in these particular areas, then people aren't leaving home. Because
Exactly.
loss of the community, you have a loss of a tax base, which means loss of funding for infrastructure development and education. But also culturally speaking, I mean, can you talk a little bit about that, about why that's important for individuals to be able to stay within their own communities, be able to, have these sorts of opportunities?
But first, a lot of people can't afford to move. They can't afford to pay off the mortgage on their house. Some of the housing is underwater. They can't afford to go and get childcare and get all the resources to look after their kids. And they understand that it's much better to live close to your parents or to your siblings. They have maybe a sibling with special needs or an elderly parent, and they want to be close to them. And then there's a value to community, to being part of your local service organization, to being part of the church or the local synagogue, to having a
Hmm.
local community paper. At a time of
Hmm.
social media where we lack community, where people are just joining whatever extreme group, I think local community plays such a constructive role in our democracy and our identity. And what we want is vibrant local communities across the country that are able to thrive with an economy that can sustain them.
Hmm. No, I entirely agree. Um, Now, my next question I would like to move on to is that, you know, what I'm really curious about is what steps moving forward as a nation do you believe we really need to take in order to implement a program like this? I know in one of the articles I'd read where you've been interviewed, you talked about a certain dollar figure you thought that was important, but not just the dollars and the budgeting that we need from a national standpoint to do something like this, but what other development do we need to have in order to make a program like this a reality?
Well, the money matters, but I agree with you. It's much more than the money. What we need is partnerships with the private sector. I mean, a lot of these skills and technology, you need private sector to be partner to give people the economic opportunity to prepare them, and like we had in Jefferson with Accenture that stepped up and Ripple
Hmm.
Technology that stepped up. We need, in my view, if the federal government is going to contract for a big tech contract, why not preference and say that at least 10% of that workforce should be rural? At least some of that workforce should be in Black or brown communities. Communities. I mean, why not and incentivize technology, especially if you're doing work for the government, to go find talent across this country? What we need to make sure that we're funding the land grant universities and making sure that people in any community can get the basic certification and credentials to get technology skills, and they can be local skills in a industry, whether it's construction or agriculture or biotechnology that works for their local economy. We need to have funding to redevelop some of the downtowns, because you want to get young people to stay, that you've got to have some vibrant downtown. And so those are just a few ideas. I mean, but the first thing is just having a philosophical commitment that place matters, that community matters. Then we can say, okay, here are the policies that can distribute the tech economy, the digital economy across the country.
Yeah, I think that's extremely vital because, like you said, community matters, and that I think is a big reason why we find ourselves so polarized. We no longer feel like we're part of a community. We have all pigeoned ourselves into these small groups, and that's where we find meaning, especially now in a time like COVID when we can't have that sort of social interaction that we're used to.
Yeah, and
No.
the promise of the digital world, if done right, is you could have the best of both worlds. You could have people rooted in their local communities, whether it's Jefferson, whether it's Carroll, and have economic possibility because they're working from remotely. They have a group of tech infrastructure that's supporting the diverse local economy, and so they have a vibrant local town. But they're still connected to the nation, to the world. So
Mhm.
they still are getting diverse perspectives. They're still working with people that are challenging their views. So you have strong community, but you have community that is being exposed to incredible diversity. And I think that balance is what's going to help us become the multiracial nation, multi-ethnic American nation that we need, a respect for locality, but a exposure to different perspectives.
And I love what you just said right there, respect for locality, but exposure to more diverse areas. All of us grow the more experience we have. I've had a unique experience that, in my job in construction, I went all over the United States, from Trenton, New Jersey to Los Angeles, and from, Danville, Kentucky, all the way up to Williston, Vermont. And all of that was driving. So I got to see a lot of local flavor, and maybe too much local flavor at some of those local diners. But, I think you're absolutely right there. It allows us to, still love and spend money within our own communities, but then to get to know everybody else. Hey, I just want to remind people one more time, make sure you check us out at newfrontieractionfund.com and check us out at New Frontier Action on Facebook. Now, I do want to get into something here that was one of my last questions, but you actually mentioned already, so I kind of want to hit on it. In a January Axios article, you mentioned that we need to infuse the Small Business Administration with loans, and that these loans should be targeted to minority communities through minority developed institutions, and that we should also target rural communities. Now, considering the effects that COVID has had on these particular communities, especially Black and brown communities, have been really devastated. How is this not only going to help us recover, but once again spur economic growth?
Well, small businesses, retail businesses, small businesses in a community are the heart and soul of a community, and we've seen the retail apocalypse. I mean, anyone who's been to a small town and you go down on Main Street and you see the business closings, they were closing before COVID. COVID has accelerated it, but I mean, restaurants closing, flower shops closing, local toy stores or bookstores closing. And these are businesses that need assistance, and that they ought to be thriving to have a vibrant economy. And so what we ought to do is make sure that they have access to capital. The PPP program, which I supported, the problem with that is, if you don't know a banker and at one of these connected banks, you're going to have a hard time getting the loan. And the thing with community banks or the minority development institutes is that they have that local relationship. So they know you, Al. They know, okay, Al's someone who's good for his word, and we know that he has the capability of doing this business, and there's a demand for it, and we're going to give him a loan. Whereas if you go to Bank of America or something, they'll say, well, who's Al? And tell us your business plan. And it's much, much harder. So that's why community banks are so important to the fabric of these communities. And what I've said is the Fed has been willing to lend to the big institutions, the financial institutions. The Fed originally was set up to be a regional economic development bank. That's why they have all these regional centers. Why not have the SBA, in conjunction with the Fed, provide community banks with loans and minority development institutes with loans? So we're really helping the small businesses that need it the most in Black and brown communities, in rural communities. That will give people the aspiration, the ability to live out their economic dreams, and it will help create vibrancy in local towns.
Yeah, one of the things that, different Black and brown business owners have found is, it's difficult to get the, loans at favorable rates and favorable amounts in order to be able to just start up the business, let alone continue it.
Yeah.
And I think that, one of the other things that's interesting to me is that, traditionally more people have usually worked at your small, locally owned places. I mean, it may seem like, Walmart employs a lot more people just because it's so large and there's so many people in there. But if you look at the number of shops, the number of towns, diners, all those kind of things, more people are actually working at something that's locally owned. And
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
they're working locally owned, and that's money recirculating into the local economy. And that's so important. We've seen this with the essential workers, right? I mean, no one stood up and said, well, the lawyers and the investment bankers and the members of Congress are essential. They said, they may have said construction workers are essential in some places where they were doing essential construction, but they said those folks who are stocking our grocery shops are essential, or picking up our trash are essential, or working at the local grocery store are essential. So it was the local jobs, the local businesses that people found most essential.
Yeah, no, I would entirely agree. I mean, I have a daughter who works for a big box retailer right now, and she wasn't deemed an essential worker, yet she had to be there, every day, several hours a day, and yet she's not deemed essential. And I think that's a mistake that's been
I
made.
completely agree. Well, how many of us? I mean, I'm certainly guilty of it. Or how many of us bought Amazon packages or had things delivered to us for food because we didn't want to go out and risk exposing to COVID, and so we said, okay, we're going to get our supplies from an Amazon, or we're going to go get our food delivery from a food delivery app. And we stop and think how many essential workers like your daughter are making that possible? And were they getting PPE? Were they getting a fair wage? Were they getting the benefits that they deserve? Unfortunately, in this case, the answer was no. And so when we talk about equity in the digital economy in the digital age, we have to think not just about geographical distribution. We have to think, okay, if the digital economy is making Ro's life easier for his family, what does it mean for the workers? And Al, the tragedy in this country is we have created such wealth, such unprecedented wealth. My district in Silicon Valley bluntly has thrived because of the digitization of the economy in COVID. Billionaires have made trillions of dollars at this period. How can we not afford to pay the middle class and working class the wages they deserve and invest in the education and healthcare of this country? That's the failing. No one begrudges the wealth generation. It's the wealth generation that's exclusionary. That's the problem.
No, I completely agree with you. When we look at traditionally any society gets the majority of their tax base from that middle class, and that middle class is disappearing. We're seeing more and more people struggling to get by. We're seeing more and more people, losing jobs thanks to COVID. And then we see, those people who are a part of that wealth class, that's just continuing to grow and expand. And that gap is widening, which is creating, further and further difficulties as far as, us being able to understand, like you said, community, neighbor, what's necessary for us to advance as a nation. And
Exactly. And what's necessary for all of us to have dignity and to have an aspiration that their kids be able to stay near them, be able to have a good life, be able to get a house, raise a family. I mean, these are the basic things that most Americans want, and that has been broken. Now, do I think that there are fundamental problems of race in this country and ideological divisions and a crisis of truth? Absolutely. Do I think they can all be reduced to economic issues? No. I think we have to be honest about those difficult conversations. But I do think providing every community in this country with pride, with dignity, with economic possibility helps us stitch this country back together.
yeah, I really think so because you're spreading out that economic opportunity that so many other people are able to take advantage of, and especially, and I hate to beat this dead horse, but going back to that, the small business loans to Black and Brown communities, to those institutions, that is a great way to help out those communities and make sure those businesses start to thrive.
Yes.
And make and then they're hiring their neighbors. They're spending money in their community. I live in a place called Valley Junction, where most of the owners of those shops live within a couple blocks of the shops that they own. So when they're
Yeah.
spending at the grocery store, it's the same one that I go to. So, but I also did want to ask you about, when we develop a program like this, what types of economic returns would you expect for something like this? People would say, oh, it's going to cost so much money. But then, when we look at the reality of it, how much wealth is that going to help us grow? How much, disparities is that going to help us put an end to?
Right. Well, first of all, look, we're competing with 1 billion people in China, and we're a country of about 330 million. How do you expect us to be able to compete if we're writing off huge segments of our population? If we're saying, okay, rural America, 15% Americans, well, we don't have to develop that tech talent there. Or Black Americans, which have been woefully underrepresented in technology and wealth generation, well, we're going to abandon that. Latino Americans, we're going to abandon that. Suddenly you're saying, well, are we writing off 40, 50% of the country and you expect us to compete with 1 billion people in China? So even if there is short-term economic cost, which there will be, I mean, is it easier to just keep funding things that have already succeeded? Of course it is. But that's not a long-term strategy. What we have to do is cultivate and develop the talent in these communities and say, we are going to bring modern economy possibilities and jobs to these communities and have them partner. And then that will create the economic growth and the economic competitiveness in the way that our country needs. And we've seen this time and again. We saw it with the manufacturing economy. See, with the manufacturing economy, we were a nation of a web of connectivity. When manufacturing succeeded, construction jobs succeeded, and energy jobs succeeded, and railroad towns succeeded. Now, when Silicon Valley and Google is succeeding, it doesn't always translate into construction jobs in another part of the country or manufacturing jobs in another part of the country. The web of connectivity has been broken. And what I'm saying is, let's build an infrastructure of connectivity in the 21st century. Let's make that fundamental investment. And that's going to allow us to compete with China. And that's going to ultimately unleash our prosperity.
Absolutely. Now, just before we got started on the program, I wanted to bring, you had talked about, a special vote that you guys had taken today. And if you could tell us a little bit about what that was and what we should be looking forward to coming out of that vote.
Well, we voted, thanks to the House leadership, to move forward on President Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. And it means a $2,000 check for Americans, 600 which has gone out, 1,400 more. It means expanded child allowance. It means worker raises in terms of an EITC. And what this bill does, and the Senate has done the same thing, is it says to President Biden, you have the ability to get this passed with 51 votes in the Senate and with a majority of the House. Now, let's try, as President Biden is, to heal this country, to reach out in good faith. If you can get Republicans to support something absolutely necessary, fine, but you don't have to compromise, and we shouldn't compromise on things that are important to the American people. Know that you have that authority, and that's what we voted on today.
Awesome. Awesome. It is so great to hear that that has happened. Another thing I want to talk about is the fact that, when we talk about, Biden mentioned unity again, and obviously we have some big splits in this country. We have, we've seen a tear in our social fabric like I've never seen before in my life. When you kind of look at what has been taking place, what do you think are the steps necessary that we need to take in order to bring us back to keep us from going to the extremes where we seem to be right now?
Well, one, what we've been talking about, economic development in places that have been left behind, that have lost pride. Second, we need to think about how we reform social media. I mean, right now, social media has become a magnet for extremism, where you go on, you're getting recommendations to join QAnon, you're getting recommendations to only talk to people in your own group. What we need is more conversations like this. And so I proposed an Internet Bill of Rights that says companies need to give people the right to their data. They can't just collect data. They need to have some basic consumer protections online and public safety. So you can't just have content that's inciting violence. We need to think about how we create thoughtful forums. I mean, why aren't we using technology for good, where we're having people in the community in Iowa talk to a community in the Bay Area, or talk to a community in the Black South? So we're actually facilitating conversations among Americans. But the final point of it, I think, is that we need to have an American narrative that we can believe in and have common identification with. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we have to look to the greats like Frederick Douglass, who talked about a composite nation, who has, as a former slave, defended the right of Chinese immigrants to come to the United States in the 1880s because he envisioned a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. Or Lincoln or Dr. King. I mean, we have these great Americans who have given us the narrative of what a common American identity can look like. And their voices are being often drowned out by a fringe, by people who aren't as studied in American history and what our country is all about. So let's have an aspirational patriotism. Let's talk about all of the Americans who've really fought and articulated the best of our ideals. And that platform, I think, can bring people together, even with great difference in our histories and our faiths and our backgrounds.
Now, have you seen, because there's a lot of debate, around about, are there Republicans who are saying, we need to pull back from that fringe, which we saw that Trump pulled us to? Are there some of them expressing concerns about that as well? Or do you feel that the party is still wholly a party of Trump?
I every time I think they're pulling back for the fringe, they then go do something that disappoints me, like 45 senators vote to not even have a trial. Do I think that there are enough Republicans who are embarrassed by what Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing? Yes, but the question is, what comes after embarrassment? As a father, if my kids do something wrong, I don't just say, okay, I'm embarrassed. I have a conversation with them and make sure they don't do that again. And there's got to be accountability. And the question here is the accountability for what's taking place. And that remains an open question. I hope that they get that accountability, because I think it's unhealthy for our democracy to have a Republican Party that has been radicalized to the extent it has.
Yeah. Now, I did want to ask you, a couple more questions. Now, were you there on that day on January 6th when there was I guess the insurrectionists at the Capitol?
Well, I was on the complex. I was in my Cannon office building, and then we had to evacuate it because there was a pipe bomb that was outside. Now, this shows the level of sophistication of that attack. That pipe bomb was intentionally planted because they wanted the police and law enforcement diverted to the Cannon office building while the mob was invading. And so I evacuated Cannon and I headed to Longworth to the cafeteria. And then I was thinking of going to the Capitol. I thought, okay, that's a safe place to be, the Capitol. And I had staff frantically text me saying, no, Ro, you go back to your office building. The Capitol is being overrun. And I couldn't really believe it. I thought maybe a few protesters had gotten in. I didn't know that there was a mob that had invaded the place. So I went back to Cannon, shut my door, locked my door, and was in my office for the rest of the day. I fortunately did not have as harrowing an experience as some of my colleagues, but people who were in the Capitol building, that was just such a threatening and vulnerable experience.
Yeah, I mean, even just watching it on TV, I couldn't believe my eyes. I couldn't believe what was actually happening. I mean, when you were in the midst of that there at the Capitol, how did you think that day was going to end?
Well, I think what is so offensive about what happened, and it's not just the destruction of property, it's not just the threat on life, but in America, we believe that our religion as a nation is not a particular a religion, because we have different diversity of faiths, but we have a religion of democracy, what Lincoln called the political religion. And the Capitol is the sacred symbol of that democracy. I mean, imagine if someone went and desecrated a holy a Christian site or Jewish site or Muslim site or Hindu site, and they just went in and they desecrated that place. It would be so offensive. And what we had this mob do is desecrate the symbols of American democracy, the temple of American democracy. And that is, I think, why it has struck a nerve with so many Americans, regardless of party.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know that recently I've heard some different individuals from Congress say they still don't necessarily feel safe. And the unfortunate fact is they don't feel safe from their fellow Congress people. Now, have you had discussions with anybody who's felt that way or thought that way or mentioned anything of that vein with you?
I have. I mean, I do feel safe personally, and and have good relationships with a number of Republicans. But I think there are particularly high profile women of color who have been attacked by right wing media that are fearful and that have had certain uncomfortable experiences, like Cori Bush, in terms of being accosted by Marjorie Taylor Greene. And that is concerning. I'm concerned for the safety of some of my colleagues. The other thing is, I don't understand why Congress people should think that they're too good to walk through metal detectors. They're too good to not harass other colleagues. I mean, you've had jobs, Al. I mean, do you get to say, no, I feel like just saying whatever's on my mind and insulting my colleagues, or I feel like I don't have to go through the security procedures that everyone else does? I mean, it's a workplace. Follow the rules. You're not special. You're just there temporarily representing a constituency. So we got to get over this ego issue that members of Congress are somehow exempt from the rules of the workplace.
No, so for those individuals who still want to flaunt those rules and say, you know what, this does not apply to me. I mean, do you believe that there's some sort of censure that should be issued, or?
Yes, yes. I mean, there should be fines. I mean, Pelosi now has fortunately $10,000 fine. Second time if you bring a gun to the House floor, that's not about the Second Amendment. You can take a gun you have your gun in your home. You can have a gun in other places. Most workplaces don't allow you to bring a gun to the workplace. I mean, this is common sense stuff. So yes, there should be significant fines. There should be censor to uphold basic workplace rights.
Yeah, and when you talk about, I've been in different workplaces. I worked in construction where, usually people's mouths aren't quite as gentle as you are in other industries. And yet, even we had certain standards of things that we could and could not say.
Exactly. That's a great point, Al.
Yeah, we were not allowed to bring guns on a job site. We were not allowed to threaten other people. We were not allowed to make, statements, online that, threatened other individuals. And the fact that we have people who are elected individuals, like you said, representing a constituency that feel that that's appropriate is frankly appalling.
Yeah, and it's a disservice to their constituency. First of all, I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish. Anything to get anything done in Congress requires a lot of people to sign off on it. And so, if you're coming in and you're starting to insult people, and not just insult people, but actually harass them or even threaten them, chances are you're not going to be very effective for your constituency. The best members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, have relationships on both sides of the aisle and are able to get things done because of that.
Yeah, and I know that you do have some, good relationships with individuals on the other side of the aisle, and I'm just kind of wondering when they hear somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, what are they saying to you about her? Are they as offended, or are they saying, she's just, speaking her mind? I mean, what are their reactions?
Most are offended. Most think that the things she's saying are crazy. The question is, are they able to act on that and censor her, strip her from committees, or is it that there's too much of the base of the party is sympathetic? But I really think for the future of the Republican Party, because I do think this country has been a two-party system and will continue probably to be a two-party system, it will be, maybe it's a short-term loss to take action against Marjorie, but a long-term gain for that party. I mean, it's none of the independent voters have much interest in voting for people who are going to go represent QAnon. Just like they don't have much interest for far left-wing conspiracies. I mean, people want folks for practical, common sense, get stuff done. And I think I think the Republican brand, even though I disagree very, very vehemently with Mitt Romney or Susan Collins about whether we need more stimulus or whether we need to restrict it and less stimulus. But that's a reasonable debate. That's the kind of debate that a democracy should have. I would never say that Susan Collins or Mitt Romney are abusing the democratic process. But when you're out there just having these crazy theories, that's not helpful to the American public.
Mm-hmm. And it also does, prevent us from having, meaningful conversations about those things we need to have action on.
Exactly.
Talking about the stimulus bill or other things that, are far more important than us being bogged down by discussing Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Exactly right, Al. It's taking up our collective mind space. It's preventing us from developing democratic capability and intelligence. It's dumbing down the American debate.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. When we're discussing, QAnon, rather than, what's the best tax structure moving forward, or, how do we help all these individuals who have lost their homes due to losing jobs during COVID? It's a pretty sad day in America. But I did want to discuss some other stuff that isn't quite so serious. Now, I know that, you've kind of been there in DC quite a while. How do you personally handle having to, deal with all the COVID and all the other things and then still missing home? Do you get much chance to actually see the family or have them come out, or how does that work out for you?
I do, and I've got very young family, so they've been with me in DC, so I've gotten actually to spend more time with them and doing a lot of things remotely with the constituency, because the challenge for me in California is if I fly back, I have to quarantine for 10 days. and can't see anyone. That's the rule of anyone coming from out of state. So it's basically flying back, staying in my apartment, and not meeting a soul, and then flying back to DC. So what I've tried to do to get overcome that is to use as many remote tools: Zoom, Facebook Live, Twitter Live, to stay in touch with the constituency. But we're blessed. We've obviously been able to have the economic security. Fortunately, no one in my immediate family, though I've had friends, obviously, like many Americans, who've gotten sick in COVID, and the ones who have in our extended family have recovered. So we've been blessed, but we feel the same loneliness in terms of not being able to see parents, not being able to see siblings, not being able to see friends. Life is about ultimately about friends and family and community. And when you go almost a year without that, even if it's not obvious on a day-to-day basis, it starts to take a toll. And in that sense, I think our we've had the same challenges as every American.
Now, I know that you had worked quite heavily with Bernie on his presidential campaign. Have you been enjoying the Bernie memes that have been on social media lately?
Well,
And
that's
which one's your favorite?
well, obviously the inauguration one was a thrilling, and seeing him with all the young kids who did it, that I thought was really neat. They all put Bernie in, and it just shows you in politics you always want to be the person that people want to have. As once you're actually there, there are hundreds of criticisms are running. But if you're not actively in the presidency or seeking the presidency, that people are saying, what, the ideas he's talking about, those actually, a lot of them make sense.
Hmm. Yeah, I know that I worked on the Andrew Yang campaign, and when it came to him talking about that freedom dividend, $1,000, once COVID hit, and then people were talking about getting stimulus checks, like, oh, this is the greatest thing, and I'm like, just a couple months ago, I was talking to all of you about that. You all thought it was crazy. Now it's the best thing in the world.
Yeah, and Andrew helped Tim Ryan and I. We proposed the $2,000 a month bill early in March, saying if we can do this for the banks and the big financial companies, we could do it for Americans. And no one is saying do it indefinitely. Look, that would cost $4 trillion in our whole federal budget. But what we're saying is do it for the few months that there is this pandemic and that people are out of work or having economic hardship.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I just want to remind people one more time before we close up shop here that this is New Frontier Action Fund. Make sure that you check us out on Facebook. Make sure you check out newfrontieractionfund.com. Congressman Khanna, I want to thank you so much for being here with me today, for visiting me here in tiny little Des Moines, Iowa.
And you're in Des Moines. I was wondering where you were broadcasting from.
Yeah, well, technically, I'm in West Des Moines, so one of the great suburbs of Des Moines. Not like there's any real difference, but it's a place that I love, and I've gotten to enjoy quite a bit. Are we going to get a chance to see you here in Iowa anytime this upcoming year?
Well, it depends on the pandemic. I want to come back to Jefferson. I want to make sure that we're continuing the work there, and really I'm emotionally committed to it. And I've said it's one of the models for the country. And I want to come to Iowa State, given the partnership we've done with Silicon Valley on regenerative agriculture. So I hope to come back this year. And if the pandemic will permit, it'd be great to see you and see my friends there. I mean, one of the great things with Iowa is that you meet so many people. And I was there obviously with Jefferson, but then there also with Bernie. And regardless of who people support, it's just such a authentic civic culture. It's not one of screaming on Twitter or Facebook. It's one of meeting people and diners and town halls and exchange of ideas to the extent there is such a thing. So I loved it out there and hope to be back.
Yeah, and I did get a message from former Iowa House member Jeff Kurtz.
Oh, Jeff is great. He's doing all of the, I love Jeff is doing such, we're in touch, Jeff and I, on email, because Jeff is really sponsoring this idea of rail and having better rail transport, which is so critical environmentally and to our country's future.
Yeah. Well, he wanted me to tell you hi, and also Mitch Henry wanted me to.
Mitch is great too. Yeah, they're two of my favorite people. Mitch, I
Yeah.
met with the coalition, and Mitch has just such a great vision. And you hang out with the very quality individuals, Al. You got a good viewership.
Well, I get a chance occasionally to, hang out with some of the best Iowans in the state, and they all want to say hi to you. And I should also mention Tiffany Gale from Little Creston, Iowa.
Of course, Tiffany. I remember Tiffany fondly, and Tiffany, great. Hi to you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for people remember me from my time here, so I appreciate that. Let's say they turn the light off here. Let me get the light back on. We're not very high tech. They've got automatic sensors that apparently I wasn't making enough gestures, so the light went off.
No problem. Well, I just wanted to thank you one more time, Ro, and see if you've got any closing comments for us here in Iowa, or what are some of the other big things that we should look for from Congress this year?
Well, I think
As,
I
yeah,
think we have a historic opportunity with President Biden in a Democratic House and Congress. We have an opportunity to show that government can work. The government is going to get a shot into every American's arm, and the vaccine's going to work, and we're going to help defeat this pandemic together. That we're going to finally raise wages for Americans. We're finally going to give Americans economic assistance to make ends meet. We're finally going to have develop the future economy in places that have been left behind and start to rebuild communities with a sense of possibility of the future. And then I think we have to think about what we're doing as Americans, or the extraordinary aspect of our project. I mean, I was born in Philadelphia in 1976, our bicentenary, and my parents came from India as immigrants, and my grandfather spent 4 years in jail during Gandhi's independence movement. And so at the age of 40, this country had elected me to represent one of the most economically influential places in the world in Silicon Valley. We are a nation where extraordinary things are possible, which is the most multiracial, multi-ethnic nation ever conceived in human history. We have the stain of slavery and Jim Crow and the way we treated Native Americans and the way we've treated women, but we have the possibility of Douglass and King that call us to see the potential of our nation. And I thought that's why Amanda Gorman touched the hearts of people around this country, because she spoke to that possibility. And that's President Biden will lead us in that direction. And I'm confident in the next decade, 2 decades, with hard work, we will build towards that kind of a nation.
well, that's my hope too, that we can do that in a collaborative sense, and like you said, work with all the communities, that we really invest in our BIPOC communities, and collaborate with them, so that we can work on some of these things that have traditionally been a stain for us. And it'd also be pretty good to have a president who lies on an average of 21 times a day. How about that? Just sanity in the White House, I think, would be
Yeah.
pretty good.
Have you noticed no one's talking about his Twitter account? That's a positive change right there.
Yes. Not to wake up every morning and click on the news and be like, oh God, what happened now? I kind of had that sick feeling in the pit of my stomach every day with the Trump presidency. I was like, what did he say now? And then oh, it's worse than I thought it would be. So,
well, people working for him didn't know if they had a job until they checked his Twitter. I mean, that's how he
yeah,
fired people. It was reality TV, which maybe the country could have suffered through. But then when you say that reality TV meant hundreds of thousands of Americans died who didn't need to die, you realize the stakes that were involved. And let's just hope we never have that kind of ineptitude in leadership at that level again.
Yeah, very much so. It shows definitely that character counts, and the truth counts.
Yeah.
That you're being truthful with the American people, and that you are being held accountable to some of the things that you do and you say. But thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you, Al. Great catching up. I'm glad we got to spend some time together. Great show, and I look forward to seeing you this year sometime.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thanks.
Right. Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here at New Frontier Action. Make sure you check us out on Facebook. Make sure that you check us out on Twitter, and check out our website as well. And as always, we need your donations to make sure that we can keep going with programs like this, and also with the other things that we do out in the community. you know, the great friends that I work with, Mark Langen and the great Reverend Rob Johnson, you know, we like working for Iowa, and we can do that with your help and with your donations. So thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. I hope to see you again soon. We've got another exciting program that's going to be coming up on the 22nd with Mayor Bruce Teague. I hope that you tune in for that one, because he is a much, much nicer and much more good-looking guy than I am, just like Ro Khanna was. Everybody have a great night, and I hope to see you again soon.